Our final segment concerns amazing new findings from study of planet Mars. The April 1 headline on the phys.org website summarizing a Nature article sounds like an April Fool's joke. First audio recorded on Mars reveals 2 speeds of sound. But in fact, the headline is an accurate summary of new, to many of us, groundbreaking research. The analysts used data from the sounds of the rover Perseverance, the helicopter Ingenuity, and the Martian wind to calculate the speed of sound. And what they learned is that, owing to the thinness of the atmosphere and other characteristics, high-pitched sounds and low-pitched sounds travel at different speeds. Only 4/100% of Earth's atmosphere is carbon dioxide. In contrast, the Martian atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide. Further, the Martian atmosphere is 1/100th as thick as the atmosphere on Earth. Thus, on Mars, sound is both about 20 decibels weaker and slower. On Earth, sound travels at 340 meters per second, which is about 1,115 feet per second. On Mars, the calculations show that the speed of sound varies between 240 and 250 meters per second, which is approximately 787 to 820 feet per second, depending on the pitch of the sound. High-pitched sounds travel faster than low-pitched ones. A quote from the article stands out. The lead author of the research, Sylvestre Maurice of the University de Toulouse, noted, quote, "On Earth, the sounds from an orchestra reach you at the same speed, whether they are low or high. But imagine on Mars, if you are a little far from the stage, there will be a big delay." Unquote. So, for many concert attendees on Mars, or on a planet similar to Mars, the high notes from the violin will arrive before the low notes of the stand-up bass, even when the strings are struck at the same time. The implications of this physical fact are mind-expanding. The most immediate implication is that, living on planet Earth, few may have realized that actually, such a fundamental constant as the speed of sound is not necessarily a constant. We obviously know that the speed of sound can vary because the speed of a sound changes if we put a wall between the source of the sound and our ear. But on Mars, the speed varies even when the medium through which the sound travels is the same. The speed of sound on Mars differs according to the pitch of the sound, not the medium through which the sound passes. It's amazing to find an entire planet whose features are such that the speed of sound varies. Once we realize this fact, many sociological questions about the likelihood and character of sentient life on such a planet arise. By one definition, for a species to be truly social, it must communicate. And if a species is going to communicate, sound provides one way to do so. But how would a species on a planet where the speed of sound varies by pitch communicate? Would their language incorporate pitch as an essential element? For example, might the tense of the grammatical equivalent of verbs be signaled by pitch differences? If so, basically, the species will have embedded the varying arrival times of information deeply into its method of communication. Such deep integration might create challenges for that species to communicate in some other environment, especially one with only one speed of sound, or with larger or smaller differences in the speeds of sound. More fundamentally, how might cognitive processes work for a species that communicates through a medium whose character is such that the gap between the sounds the speaker makes and the sounds the listener hears differs? Note that this means that even the order of the sounds might be scrambled between speaker and listener. Might the cognitive apparatus of such a species end up being developed in a way that would make communication between it and an orally monospeed species such as humans impossible? Alternatively, might such a species avoid using sound and instead develop a visual language, much like a sign language, to communicate? Might it enrich its signaling with the equivalent of facial expressions, speed, or bodily posture while signaling? Might listeners simultaneously, consciously, and systematically respond, making a speaker's expressions a much more clearly collaborative enterprise, a much more deeply social one? Before learning of the varying speed of sound on Mars, I would have simply asserted that the speed of light is a constant. And, truth be told, as far as we know, the speed of light is a constant, and there seems no reason to suggest otherwise. But now I realize I need to recognize that this is an assumption. It's a strongly justifiable assumption with a great deal of empirical evidence behind it, as well as theoretical work, but an assumption nevertheless, at least in the context in which I'm now going to use it. And that context is that, assuming the speed of light is a constant, a sign language would sidestep the challenges that variable speeds of sound might pose. If so, that is to say, if such a species developed relied more on a sign language rather than a sound language, what humans experience is devising and using sign language, as well as humans fluent in sign language, be essential for establishing communication if humans were to ever encounter such a species? In that sense, note that the people who are deaf are among the most fluent and adept users and innovators of the various sign languages that exist. Given this fact, might this reveal yet another context where full inclusion of people from diverse backgrounds with different skills and perspectives would prove essential? These are interesting questions, and there are probably dozens more, and they're quite fun to think about. At the same time, they also raise a very serious matter. The universe is an amazingly surprising place. We take a great deal of our universe for granted, because if we did not take it for granted, we would be paralyzed by uncertainty and doubt. Just taking the next breath requires us to make a series of assumptions about the physical world and its stability. Assumptions like assuming that all the oxygen hasn't been siphoned off the planet, no cloud of poisonous fumes has wafted over, our lungs have the capacity and will continue to have the capacity to extract the needed oxygen, and more. We must assume our world is stable and will operate in a similar way from breath to breath. And while this assumption and many others is backed up by human experience is less than a blink of an eye in the history of the universe. Still, taking the world for granted is functional for human activity. We need to take some things for granted. Alas, our need to take some things for granted can end up smothering our curiosity as well as our openness to the possibility that there are other ways our cultures, constants, and corner of the universe could be arranged. This analysis of data from our most studied planetary neighbor reveals that seemingly fundamental, defining features of our world need not be common. We have analyzed the sound of only one other planet. Yet this one new source of data reveals that despite our experience on Earth, half of the planets studied so far have multiple speeds of sound. In that lesson lies an important implication. If we hold on too tightly to what we have learned from living on planet Earth as we journey further, our knowledge may actually end up limiting our understanding rather than providing the point of departure for deepening it. But this sobering implication bears within it inspiration. Activities like space exploration can offer one way to protect ourselves from having too much faith in the assumptions by which we now live. But for that protection to take hold, we have to be open to the possibility that the conditions we find as we explore may not confirm any assumptions we may have of superiority or even competence. Instead, our explorations may actually humble and inspire us, as we might be humbled and hopefully inspired by encountering a species whose evolution on a planet with variable speeds of sound gave them cognitive capacities far different from, and perhaps superior in some ways to, those we, in our mono-aural speeded environment, were unable to develop or needed to have. The good news is that we need not wait for space exploration to bring us a chance to marvel at and be inspired by such differences. Opportunities abound for exposure to and learning from and among living beings who hail from different environments, right here at the site of our single case study, planet Earth. That's This Week in Sociological Perspective. We'll be back next week with another interview with an author of some important sociological research and more sociological insights on an issue in the news. Till then, take care.